Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Oh,
Um, okay, people will probably still be hopping on. We're gonna leave it as a kind of multi-person screen. And kind of keep it more casual. So today we have Dan Schley from Schley Appraisals on, and to help us answer some questions, kind of go over the general appraisal process. Um, And Dan, just to kind of give you more background on this contract training, so generally this is aimed at brand newly licensed agents. So we're really going to simplify it. And then we did and hope that newer or more seasoned agents come on, I should say, in case there are questions just generally about appraisals. And we might have some questions in regards to changes with how you might do your process based off of the new NAR changes. So, just to dial it way back, and again, for our like brand newly licensed agents, like what is an appraisal?
Oh, way back.
Way back.
An appraisal is actually has several meanings. There's an appraisal process, which is the way an evaluation model is developed. There's also an appraisal report, which is the written form, either form or narrative style of expressing that opinion in writing. So
Okay.
appraisal is used for both things, kind of in the marketplace, but it really is two different things. One's the process of building the valuation, the other is the reporting of the process.
Okay.
And basically, we are tied to a definition of value that's right in the report. Basically, it's a typically informed buyer, a typically motivated seller, and a typical amount of time in the market. So we're not looking at the person who comes in from out of state, has one day to buy a house, buys it with a California mindset. That's not a typically informed buyer. Or a person who's financially distressed, really has to get out of the house, needs, has reasons other than normal motivations to sell. Again, not a typically motivated seller. So we're
Okay.
looking at that normal, and that definition is in every appraisal.
Okay. Actually, that's something that I was not aware of. So I'm glad we dialed it way back.
Sure.
Um, so in a typical transaction then, who is hiring you to perform an appraisal?
The majority of the time, it's the lender for the buyer. They are
Okay.
my client. I am their customer. I have a fiduciary responsibility to them.
To the lender. Okay. And their purpose, like why do they want to make sure?
They're, they want to protect their position in the transaction. They don't want to loan too much money. They don't want to put themselves at risk. I mean, they have you know, reasons to make valid and safe loans. So they will typically loan, depending on bringing in private mortgage insurance, 80% of the purchase price or the appraised value, whichever is lower. So
Okay.
you can still get a loan if the buyer is paying above market for the house. They just can't get 20, have 20% down. If they have more of their own money, the bank doesn't mind that they are taking that risk of a trending market. They just don't want to be the ones taking the risk.
Got it. Okay. Do buyers ever hire you directly?
Most of the time, that's done if there's not going to be a lender in the picture. They're coming in with cash. They really want to just sort of make sure that they have a non-biased opinion of value. Um, More often than not, that's not the case. Sometimes a seller will ask for an appraisal before they put the house on the market, or if they've got several people who are interested in their house, they want to, do this unfortunately without you. They want a value to base it on.
Okay.
The way that the rules are now, if that buyer then decides to buy it and then goes to get a loan, they would not be able to use the appraisal that I had done for the seller. The rules are that it has to be ordered by a federally regulated lending institution to be used at one.
Okay. I did, so
in effect, the buyer then would have to have another one done, or the
Right.
lender would require another one to be done.
Right, okay, totally get that. I didn't even know it was the case that at one time you could use the seller's appraisal.
As I like to say, before I personally collapsed the world economy in 2008, that's when a lot of those rules changed.
Okay.
Oh, they said, no, they have to be the one ordering it. They have to be the one in control of the process. They've removed a lot of I guess they think that I can be influenced by that seller or by somebody else. Now,
Right.
I mean, I've done this since 1986. Nobody's ever influenced me.
Sure.
It's the only thing I look at.
Okay.
Is there a difference between a loan appraisal and just a personal appraisal?
It's got the same definition of value in it.
Okay.
So there really can't be a difference of opinion because it's tied to that definition of value.
Got it.
Joan, do you mean to just like appraisals for like refis and stuff? Okay.
Yeah. Again, if I'm tied to a definition, I have to follow the definition.
Sure. Okay. Okay, so lender is ordering the appraisal, they're the ones hiring you. Your client is technically the bank in a
Right.
traditional transaction. In the process of your analysis, where are you mostly getting your information from?
I use MLS. I use assessor records. I use, if it's an area where I know that things have been selling a lot by owner, I'll, dig in and try to find things that have sold by owner. Oftentimes I know that area really well. I know people who live there. So I'll call somebody up and say, do you know anything in your neighborhood that sold recently without using realtors? Then I can dig into that to try to find information out about that house.
Okay.
Easiest way to get it is through MLS. So the more information that's in an MLS listing, the better that comparable can be used.
Got it. Okay.
Does
Go ahead.
it affect your value if there have been multiple offers on the property?
Well, ultimately, the sales price is the sales price. That is, a closed sale. So there's multiple offers. What does that mean? Did that agent underlist the property? Did they not do a good job of valuing it? I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why something can be listed lower, but ultimately the market is where it finds that sales price.
Mm-hmm.
The market has spoken.
Is that information you want to have though?
Sure. I mean, I'll take any information you want to give me. Whether I, can use it or not is up to me in my process to make that determination.
Okay.
But never say, no, I don't want information.
Okay.
Oftentimes a realtor knows, like I've been working with these people who own this house. They've told me the house across the street sold, no idea how much for, but those people moved a week and a half ago. Well, that gives me something to go look for. So that's the kind of information that I know I just can't pull out of MLS. So if you know something, definitely share it. The thing that gets a little frustrating on my end, and since you're all here and I have the mic, I'll share, is a house is listed, random numbers, for $200,000. 2 days later, it sells for $225,000. A week later, I go and meet the agent who gives me a pile of comparables that are all sold for over $250,000. And it's like, so are these the sales you used when you priced the house a week and a half ago? Obviously not. So that's just sort of telling me, I mean, maybe you think it's my first day. I I don't, I can't really put any kind of credence in that that work that you pulled out. You're not telling me what you actually thought a week and a half ago. So that's not real helpful.
Could I challenge that?
Sure.
And because I know that I have definitely pulled comps that might have been, over and above what something has sold for, but also to show like this one has better finishes and that's why it sold for this.
But you didn't list it for that.
No. But like,
so then you weren't using that data when you listed the house last week. You're now finding new data to try to convince me of something that you didn't convince yourself of.
well, no, I think that having data showing why something is more expensive versus the one that you list.
Well, that's fine. Our goal is to bracket, to have higher and low. That's the process. But to say, here's my data, this is what I used, and it doesn't line up with what you listed, that's just sort of a bit of a false flag. Don't give me data, or don't say it's the data you used.
Other than it does show that the area around it, the neighborhood around it, is supporting higher values.
But then why wasn't it listed for that?
True. Yeah.
Well, it could not have been listed for that because of the condition of that particular listing. Like, if it had maybe if it had like finishes that would get it into that higher bracket, then it could be pushed to that. I don't know. I guess that's just data, and I don't want to like beat a dead horse.
Yeah, it just.
I think
if you give me data, don't say that it's the data you used when it clearly isn't the data you used, or you would have listed it for a different amount.
Okay, I think we're having okay.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful for appraisers also to see notes on why you have used that comp or given that?
I'll look at anything you want to give me.
Okay,
but I'm still going to do my work.
Yes, like you're still. It doesn't change how you are going to do your process.
I'm happy to look at anything you want to give me.
Got it. Okay.
Now, I'm not sure all appraisers are like that. We don't talk to each other very much. We're not very friendly. But I'm happy to see anything.
Okay. No, I think that's helpful just from like the listing agent perspective, any data that you're pulling and, seller improvement sheets, like obviously that's going to be helpful to you.
Sure. And often those have been uploaded as documents into the MLS. So I'll get to see those on things I'm using as comps too, if the agent has actually gone and uploaded lists of improvements as a document in the MLS.
Yes, and that's
really helpful. Really helpful.
That's important for everyone to hear then too, as listing agents, and to make sure that we're uploading every single thing that we have available. Like anything that we're giving to a buyer, we should be having it available in MLS for other agents too.
When I go on a listing presentation, one of the services I highlight that a listing agent can do for the seller is to help the appraiser see the full value. And I know there are a lot of agents that totally ignore the appraisal and just sit back and sit by the phone and cross their fingers. But I think a good listing agent does help the appraiser find the information that they need. So it's something to really take a proactive stance on.
Mm-hmm. So then personal preference in terms of receiving information, because I think this is something that trips up a lot of listing agents. Like if a listing agent was going to meet you at a home, is that a welcome? And I think every appraiser is different, but is that a welcomed gesture?
As long as they listen to my rules, because I'm old and I have rules. I'm happy to meet you. I'm happy to get anything in hand, but please don't follow me around the house. Please don't sell me the house. I can't think about what I need to look at, what I need to keep track of, what I need to write down, how I structuring my inspection is basically what I use to then get back and give that information to the client. So I don't need somebody following me around pointing out, and this room is lovely. It's got, that muddies brain, and I need to concentrate on what I'm doing.
Okay.
So, meet me, give me the things, wait in the living room, be available if you want for questions when I get done. If the agent's not there and I have questions, I will make phone calls, to say, do you know anything about this? But just the following around, I know everybody wants to be always selling, and that's great when it's a potential buyer, but I need to do my thing.
And I agree, that's where you stop, yes.
Your
is
job is done.
what in your mind is the difference between an agent's comparable market analysis and an appraiser's report?
The main thing is what an agent tells a homeowner has bias. You are paid based on the amount of money that house sells for, and that inherently builds in bias. I am there as an unbiased, investigator and valuator. So I'm not paid based on the value. My appraisal costs the same if it's a $100,000 house and it's a $500,000 house. So that removes any kind of if I say this is higher, I'm going to make more money. And bias isn't a bad thing. That's the motivation for realtors, is you want to sell it for more money because that's the only way you're getting paid. So those are the two different things. So really, as far as the bottom line it's a matter of bias.
Sure. I think there's also, as listing agents too, an overinflated price doesn't help, doesn't help our sellers either. We have a fiduciary to them to.
Sure. They shouldn't be, but
yeah, generally.
That's really why a lender wouldn't use a broker's opinion.
Sure.
Because it doesn't meet that, rule of bias that they are looking at for their own self-interest.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't need me. They would use you, or they would use Zillow.
1000%.
I think one of the things that over the years has changed depending on the type of market we have, like as you said back in 2008, what you listed it for was totally different than what you'd listed for today, being a seller's market. Or back when I started, when the interest rates were 16%, what kind of price you had on there, what kind of value you had on there had to be very important and different than the kind of value you put on it today.
Right.
So tied to the type of market we have. And I think agents have to understand that, learn the market, learn what's happening. What are the trends? Look at the stats in MLS. Be able to appreciate the market you're working in, because it's going to change always.
Constantly.
Okay, well, and that's helpful. Again, just kind of getting back to that listing agent, like, what do I do? What do I don't do? We kind of get that question a lot, or that conundrum, and we're like, agents are scared of making appraisers mad or turning them off.
Life is way too short to get upset.
Yeah.
Just bring the appraiser cookies.
Yes.
That still won't influence me, but I do like cookies.
But okay, so just everyone to hear that, yes, information of course is welcome. Okay, now once an appraisal gets issued, you get your report done. Oh, and this is just kind of a general question about process. When you are doing your report, and maybe it changes sometimes on how you're completing it, But are you visiting the home first and then going out and gathering information, or are you trying to prep as much as possible and then going to visit the home?
I before I go, I make sure that the order from the lender doesn't have the wrong address, that the person's name that's on there aligns up with a property, because sometimes they make a typo in the order sheet that I get through the email. So I want to make sure I'm going to the right place.
Yes.
I don't do any like looking at assessor records, looking at them, like trying to come up with an idea of the value, because I don't want to be prejudging, especially on things like refinancing. I don't necessarily know what's been done inside that house. You know, sometimes it's listing that sold so fast that there really not much information in the MLS on that sheet, on that house yet. So
Sure.
if I think, oh, this is going to look like this, and I go and do a lot of work, like here are the comps I think I'm going to use, here's the data I'm going to use, and I get there and it's got a brand new kitchen and it's got brand new bathrooms and the basement's been finished that I didn't know. I've done a lot of work for nothing. I'm going to have to start over. So
Okay.
I just don't like working for nothing. So I see the house, I get it in my brain, and then I start finding the things that compare to it and the positives and negatives and making all that process. It just works for me. Other people might do it differently.
Okay. No, that's more just a general curiosity
Yeah.
question. So I would have thought the opposite, but as you said, other people might do it differently.
They may. I find that sometimes I do that. And I mean, I had one case where again, it was a refinance, so there wasn't great information. And this was a while back before there was much assessor records available. So I'm going pretty blind in some ways. But the last time it had sold, it was a ranch. I get there, and that house has been completely turned into a 2-story house with a big addition off the back. I mean, it is a different house than what they bought.
Yeah.
How I would have done a lot of work for nothing. And that does happen. I mean, it is amazing sometimes that how much people change houses.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just looking at notes here. Okay, so back to what I think I was going to start with. So you've got, you're finished your process, you've issued your report, you send it off to the lender. It's lower than the purchase price. That dispute process, and it might, again, might be different for every appraiser, but if we've got buyers out there who want to challenge what an appraiser issues, and let's say comps, they've got their own that they want to provide to you, how does that work in terms of just like when you're getting called, there's a dispute?
Well, ultimately, under the rules that we're tied to, again, after I collapsed the world economy in 2008, I have to hear from the lender. They are my client. So that buyer can go to the lender and say, hey, I have other information. Are you willing to send that to the appraiser and have them look at it again? Some lenders will just say no. This is what it is. This is what we'll do. I mean, it's their ball and they get to play the game the way they want.
Sure.
The ones I work for will typically, if there's data that isn't in my report, they'd like me to at least look at it and say, does this make sense? Or maybe it doesn't. So I hear from the lender that that's there. And of course, I will look at that data. I will see if it leads me to a logic problem in my report. I mean, I wish I was perfect. I'm not. I wish I was always right. I'm not. And so I will always look at that. But the buyer or the realtor I'm not allowed to have that conversation with them.
Got it.
According to the rules. And if I do have the conversation with them, that can lead to me having licensing problems and me having possibly putting a good client at risk. So I just can't, unfortunately.
Sure.
I can be pleasant and say, you know what, you're going to need to talk to your lender about that. I'm happy to look at anything they provide me, but it's got to go through that chain of request.
Okay,
Okay,
that
hold
can,
on.
that,
I'm gonna jump in here with a quick question about that.
Sure.
All right. In the last 2 years, since you said you're not perfect, how many times have you revised an appraisal?
2 years, that's a lot.
1 year.
It happens on a handful of times. Often that data comes and I'm, appraising a 2,200 square foot English, and the data that they're sending are not in the same neighborhood, and they're 3,400 square foot. I mean, they're Zillow comps. They're the kind of things you see online. They're just not something I could use. I can't, it's apples and oranges. And then I'll send a note back to the lender saying, this is the reason why this doesn't work within the appraisal process. So I'll give them an answer. I want you to say, no, not interested. They will always get a response. And sometimes there is one that, it was pending the day I did the appraisal. I tried to get some information from that broker about the sale. Never heard back from them, which happens a lot.
sure.
That I send an email or I leave a voicemail for an agent and I never hear back. So is this about to close? Is it something I should wait to get information? Is there any information you can share about it? And then in the 2 weeks that has happened, that house closed. It actually is a good comp. I now have sales, a closed sale with good information. And of course, yeah, I would have loved to have it 2 weeks earlier. But if I can't get a verification, I just can't use it.
Good point. That actually goes back to a question we probably should have asked earlier. How far back do you typically go in terms of sales? Like it has to sell within a certain time frame, right? In order for you
The lenders will allow me to go back 1 year.
Okay.
And obviously adjust for time as that has changed. The values have gone up in time lately, or at one point in time, down in time. They would prefer 6 months, and I think there's some lenders who are real firm on that. I don't work for any of the big national, international chain, big banks. I work for community lenders by and large. So they're more aware of their communities, of what's going on. So they tend to, I've never had anybody say, no, a year is too old. If a house sold 14 months ago, that is literally exactly like this house. I mean, they've done the same updates. It's the same size. It's a block away. I'll use it because it helps me, but it has to be in addition to the minimum amount that they require. They won't say that's one of your top three. It's got to be sort of, look, here's the same house. Here's what happened. This is what happened over time. This puts me right in line with where this house is selling.
Sure.
So it's a really good comp for me. It's just not one for them.
Okay.
It'll still be in there.
Sure.
I've had agents ask if the appraiser knows the accepted purchase price before he does the.
Yes. According to all of the fire, there's a lot of USPAP and FIREA and UAD. We have a lot of acronyms, but according to the rules, we are required to, they say, in the course of ordinary business, obtain and analyze the offer to purchase. If somebody refuses, I have to have in there, this was refused, the reasons why it was refused. That came up around that same time as there were people putting a lot of personal property into appraisals that was kind of buried in the appraisal. We never heard about it. So something selling like here and a BMW is included, which has happened, that's obviously needs to not be part of the real estate. So seeing the offer, we can see if any personal property, seller concessions, all sorts of things that can go into an offer, we'll be aware of it. So yes, we do have a copy. I mean, I've never had anybody refuse to give it to me.
I've had a client that did not want the purchase price be given to the appraiser.
Well, then that appraiser would either not be able to do the appraisal and would have to turn it back to their lender, or do a lot of explaining of why it's not being analyzed because we're not meeting the USPAP, the uniform standards of professional appraisal practices.
Okay, and that's always been.
Which we
I'm
say in the
talking-
appraisal, we are meeting all of those standards.
Okay. And that's always been that way?
No.
I'm looking back at the
USPAP
80s.
was developed, I'd say, I'm terrible at years. The late 90s, early aughts is when
Right.
that kind of, we started looking at standards and trying to make some consistencies about how we work and what we're held accountable to. So it's a pretty extensive set of standards that, we get changes every year, and we have continuing every 2 years on what's new and what's changed and how they've tweaked it. So it does tie us to a lot of rules, a lot of standards. And the appraisal says that this conforms with the uniform standards. So I kind of have to do it. If I'm not doing it and not explaining why I'm not doing it, I should reject that assignment.
Yeah, a lot of changes.
We had a question from Nada. Nada, do you want to unmute and?
Yep. Hello, Ron. Thank you for being with us. It's so helpful. And I hopped on late. So if this has been covered, tell me, and then Steph can fill me in when I see her on Wednesday. But I'm curious, price per square foot, how do you treat it versus list price or comps in the absence of comps 6 months to a year?
Price per square foot, if I was really using that, then that means the square footage would be the only factor that influenced value.
Okay.
I mean, there is an adjustment for square footage, and that's pulled out of the market reactions to differences in sizes. That's one adjustment. The appraisal has a price per square foot line. Really, the only thing that tells me is I'm kind of consistent. There's a range, and my value is within that range. That's telling me I found a good higher and lower, better and worse, to try to bracket the property I'm doing. So that's sort of, for me, that's a check. It's just a check like, okay, I haven't thought wrong about the comps I've picked. Or if it's really out of line, what's making it so? You'll have a case where you don't have a lot of houses that have, beautifully remodeled kitchens. So that's been a kind of an across the board adjustment, always positive, but maybe different depending on how different those kitchens are. That could throw that cost per square foot up higher because the size is the same, but something else has happened. So it's not really, I don't say, okay, I'm gonna take an average of those. That's what this is going to be. It's kind of what the assessors do in some ways. They do a lot with, value per square foot, but it eliminates all the other differences that your buyer is looking at. Most of them don't actually really understand what square footage is or what's the difference. Somebody could walk through a house that's 2,000 square feet and 2175 and probably not really notice the difference as like, oh, this is 170 feet bigger.
Sure.
It's not part of the emotional mindset of buying a house. We look at it as a factor, but that's because we're diving into much more analyticals than they like the house. And they like the new kitchen, and they love the fact that the bath is updated, or, you know, it has a, you know, private bath off of the primary bedroom. There's a lot of not square footage that's really driving that decision.
Well,
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I stick one more question in there?
Sure.
I was in a unique situation several months ago where two of the key comps were for sale by owner, and the only records were really like the tax record and RPR. So I actually forwarded that to the assessor as an FYI, or the appraiser as an FYI, just so that because I knew of it because the owner of the home knew that the two houses on the block sold by owner.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to be a two-way communication. It was just simply, I'm placing on your desk some things for consideration. Still okay to do that?
Sure. And if it's a really, you know, good similar house on that block, I mean, there's some blocks that you have a 2-bedroom Cape Cod next to a 4,800 square foot new house, you know, Whitefish Bay. You can't really compare the two. But if I have that information, I'll do my best to get more information. You know, perhaps then I'll call the owner of the house back and say, do you know the people who bought that or the people who sold it? Is there a way I could call them to get information? Because I don't want to miss something because it's not convenient. If somebody can give me access to information, or, you know, the buyer of the house said, oh yeah, I mean, I have the appraisal from when we got our loan. Can I send it to you? It's like, of course you can. Please send it to me. So
Perfect.
data,
Yep.
we're driven by data and as accurate as possible. Now, if there's two houses that sold by owner at like this price, even without being able to use them, it will definitely tell me this block is supporting, you know, I can in my mind use it. I just can't put it and make it part of my proof to the lender.
And
Happy to hear.
what is an appraiser's method of determining square foot?
I measure. The ASCII standard, basically for a single family house, it's an exterior measurement of the first floor, depending on how the second floors are. If it has truncated walls, we measure the interior at a 5-foot wall height. So bungalows that don't go all the way out to the first floor basically measure from 5 feet to 5 feet, and the appraisal will have a sketch in it. It'll have all the calculations. So but yeah, it's exterior measurements, but then inside we need to look at that 5-foot wall height.
Interesting.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and like, correct me if I'm inaccurate with this comment. But you had said that you only work for community lenders, right?
I personally do, because I don't really want to deal with the bureaucracy of, and I won't use names, but you know who the large ones are. A lot of those use what are called appraisal management companies, where we're actually getting the request through. I don't even know who the lender is. I get it from these management companies, which in my mind is a dangerous place because those are completely unregulated. Where banks are regulated and I'm regulated and you guys are regulated. There's absolutely no oversight in those management companies.
Interesting.
They sometimes will make me pay a fee to get an appraisal request, which I'm not willing to do, because how do I put that? I mean, that's just not the way I've ever done work. Like I said, I've done this since '86, so it's a newer thing, and I've been blessed to have clients who don't use them that are really good clients, if I have a question, I can actually call up the bank and say, can you tell me about this? Where with them, I have to, send an online note. They have to then eventually get back to the lender, who eventually gets back. It could be a month before there's a communication. I've had cases where, it's a refi. I go to the house. No, I haven't heard anything. I get there. They're remodeling the kitchen. It's literally gone. There is no kitchen in the house. Now, I could say what was the kitchen before and value it with the old kitchen. I could value it with the new kitchen, or I could value it as is with no kitchen. That's a decision the lender would make. How are they structuring the loan? I need to be able to call. I need to say, this is what I found. That lender might not even know. They maybe didn't tell the lender that they've gutted their kitchen. So then we need to figure out if they're doing it subject to completion. I need to show, I have plans for that kitchen. I have specifications of what the kitchen's going to be. I do it subject to completion. They need me to go back and make sure it did get done. So there's a whole different lending process, which is fine by me. But again, it's their call.
Right.
If I can't get an answer for a month, that's out. My brain has moved on to 30 other houses at that point.
We're always pushing our agents to be pushing their buyer clients to be using community and local lenders where possible.
Yeah.
And this is a variable that I don't think we even really addressed in terms of just it also makes the appraisal process easier if you use a community lender,
It's easier. I mean, I tried once to get involved with one of the management companies, and it was such a nightmare that I effectively fired that bank within a month.
Sure.
I can't work this way. I mean, McDonald's would be easier.
No, that's really helpful. So I'm glad that came up in this because it's just one more thing that we can say, this is another reason why to our buyer clients, this is why you want to.
And especially with it a younger client, I personally I've always had my personal banking with community banks, with local lenders. You have a mortgage with that place and your car dies, you have somebody you can call and say, I need to get a new car fast. Can I do a car loan? And there's somebody there who will do that for you. You get, Excel lending out of the internet. You don't have that relationship. Your kids are going off to college and you want to do an equity line. You have a lender who you can go back to say, let's take this to another level.
Mhm.
So having relationships, I mean, it's why I think you all try to make sure that your clients are happy and they come back to you. You've built a relationship with that person. You get to know each other. You know that it just is a better way of living to have those personal relationships.
Awesome. Thank you for.
So that's just my personal side.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it so much. I mean, again, it's just speaking to another reason why we want to be using just our local resources. So,
But
okay.
that's also how you build your reputation, and your name and your personal business has been golden because people
Right.
trust you and that the communities.
Right.
Okay, so can we get to now? I think this is hopefully our final kind of touch point.
Okay.
With the changes in the NAR, and now that you see commission built into offer to purchases now, that's happening more often than not. How, if it has, how has that changed how you analyze?
There's no change in the definition of value based on that. So really, there was no difference in the value of a house if it's sold by owner or with a broker, where there was a commission. you know, whether those are the expenses that a seller is willing to pay in order to facilitate a transaction. It doesn't change the value of the house.
Okay.
Typically informed buyer, typically motivated seller, typical time in the market. And there's nothing about, oh, and did they pay a commission or not? That's so bottom line is I tied to a definition.
Okay.
The difference in commission structure has never been there.
Okay.
A house isn't worth more if it sells with a broker than if it sells by owner,
Okay.
right? That's what it's worth.
That would be true with concessions as well.
Concessions can inflate the value, and the lenders require that we know about them and analyze how they affected that purchase price. It's not necessarily a dollar for dollar, it's market driven, but that is, you know, a seller's concession and also personal property that's included. Some of which may be standard things, you know, house on a lake, you know, the rowboat and the dock is included. Their personal property. So in that appraisal, if I were to include them, even if everybody's kind of leaving that stuff, I would need to do a personal property appraisal on it,
Okay.
which I don't do.
Yeah.
So they're just not included. And if there's a value difference, you know, maybe they really weren't worth anything. They were just left because it's easier for the seller to leave it than to move it. That's how the valuation process is for the real estate, not personal property. Because I don't want to start appraising a rowboat.
Okay. Any other questions? This was great.
I have a favor for everyone, every realtor that I could possibly talk to. It's when you sell a house, you know, single party, put it in MLSs saying, you know, sold single party for comp purposes only, which is there all the time. That's completely worthless to us.
Yeah.
Write your paragraph, make your description of that home. Ask if you can take some pictures, get some pictures up on there. Without information, you know, I can try calling. Again, the number of people who will not reply when I call and ask for information about one of those, the ones who do reply, I could probably count on one hand.
That's amazing.
So there it is in MLS. You're saying it's for comp purposes. You probably paid a fee. I mean, back in the olden days, there was a fee to upload things to MLS. I don't know if there still is. But if you pay a fee, you're just wasting your money because nobody can use it, at least not legitimately. You got to give us information.
No, this is great. We can, and it helps everybody. I mean,
exactly. Why wouldn't you want to have everybody know that how, you know, and it's the paragraph that's in other listings. It doesn't take that long to describe the house.
Right.
If the sellers say, sure, you can take some pictures. You know, I had a case where somebody did call me back and I was asking, it's like, oh, well, why don't I just send you the, you know, the marketing sheet that I had drawn up. It's all ready to go. And we just sold it so fast. Like, upload that document in the documents on your MLS. Because it's really helpful.
Yeah.
I think Joan, that's a good team meeting topic, actually.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I've always encouraged that to agents as a manager, that when an appraiser calls, please respond and give him the information he needs, because we work as a team on this.
Right. Yeah, I think some people are like, well, I already sold that one. I know that's over with. I don't need to. We're not worrying about that anymore. But I'm 2 months down the line worrying about it.
But also it helps us listing agents and buyers agents when we need to see information.
It helps everyone.
Yeah, when we're doing our CMAs and yeah, of course. So, okay, any other questions from the group?
Yes. Okay, so this, I'm gonna use it an example, but I know I'll apply it to broad strokes. So if you have a house that has the same amount of bathrooms as another one, but one is an ensuite, is there a spot that you say this is worth more because X and it has an ensuite? Because we know as buyers would prefer an ensuite.
Right.
What do you do?
I'm reflecting that buyer's process. You know, do they pay more for that? Then that should be in the appraisal. We don't really have a line for that, except under the functional utility line, which is sort of a catch-all part of the appraisal grid. So I will make that market adjustment in that area and then explain it in the narrative. So the lender knows, what did that mean? These two, the second bath was, you know, ensuite to the primary bedroom. These ones, it wasn't. So if you describe it, then they'll understand what you did up here. But you have to use a lot of narrative description about the thought process. So that's the place where I'll put that, because, you know, if you say 2.5 baths, 2.5 baths, 2.5 baths, 2.5 baths, and you make an adjustment for baths, they're going to red flag it. They're going to like, wait, they're all the same, and you're saying they're different. So then I get a phone call. Then I have to like, and they'll say, well, can you just explain that? It's like, I should have explained it. So that's how I do it. I don't know how other people do it. I think it's legitimate. I think the market does act differently with a private bath compared to one that doesn't have it. So it should be in there. I found a place I could squeeze it.
Good question.
Mhm. What about?
Can I jump?
Go ahead, Hen.
Sorry, Joan. Along that same line, I'm in a situation right now where I'm comping a house on a block where there was a sold, but the sold is 4-bedroom, 3-car garage, and my house is 3-bedroom, 2-car garage. Are there standard numbers that we can back out? It's a great comp for it. It's just a bigger house.
Unfortunately, those adjustments are drawn from the market in that particular place. You know, the difference between a 2-car and a 3-car garage in one community or one neighborhood could be very different from in another. Is the 3-car more of the normal, and this 2-car is kind of a deficit, or is everything 2 cars and the 3-car is a positive? I mean, so how the market reacts is really driven by location.
Interesting. I would have never guessed that.
There's
Okay.
not a garage space is worth $5,000 no matter where you are, because that's not the way. Again, you know, the old line in real estate was the 3 most important things in real estate: location, location, and location. That drives everything.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Joan, I think you were going to say something.
Well, it was just the sort of value on a finished basement, the same thing as like an ensuite.
Again, market in an area drives how much somebody's going to pay for the basement. Seldom is it a dollar for dollar. What people pay in their basements is not what they'll get out of the basement.
Good.
You know, again, I see, and it's like, what is the buyer thinking? It's a 4,000 square foot house. There's 1,000 square feet finished in the basement that the people spend $150,000 on. Hey, everybody, come over to our house. Let's go to the basement. People don't do that. They've got a beautiful house. The basement's a place to throw their children. And sometimes they don't even have children. So how much are they giving you for that $150,000?
I think that's the key point, because the seller wants to get every nickel out of the basement that they did, and that's not what it's worth to the value.
They didn't talk to me before they did it.
Now we
Or
know.
you, for that matter.
Right.
But wouldn't full exposures be the exception to the rule because it lives like a house?
Again, location driven. If it's a full exposure walkout, the value return is higher. Again, the rules that we're under, if it's 1 foot below grade, it's supposed to be considered separately from above grade. Now, I break that rule if I'm doing a full walkout bi level and all the comps are full walkout bi levels. I'm not breaking them all apart. And I'm explaining, yes, this is partially below grade space, but because it's common in this area, all of the comparables have the same, same kind of walkout feature. It's all being considered as part of square footage. That's breaking the rules that were given. And some appraisers are very firm. They will never break a rule. In the rules, it does say if variation needs to be made, it can be done with full explanation. Just explain what you're doing. And this is to us, real appraisers need to know you can explain that you're doing something different. But it actually makes the appraisal better because you're getting a better indication of value. If all the sales are the same, you're comparing apples to apples. It doesn't matter where the space is then, because they're all doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
Third floor space, houses that have a finished, attic, big houses, finished third floor space, that gets broken apart the same way basement space would be, because if you had, like, two levels, the house is 4,000 square feet. This one has 3,000 square feet with 1,000 in the attic. Is the buyer looking at those houses the same? They're not. But if I say they're all 4,000 square feet and there's no adjustment for that, I'm giving a misleading valuation.
Got it.
So you're, again, getting to apples. Make your, and then those extras get broken apart and adjusted separately.
Okay.
Super information. Thank you.
Yeah. And to get ahead of it, we like to have an appraiser. We try and get an appraiser like once a year on our contract training. So we'd love to have you back next year.
Let me know. You know where to find me.
I do.
Until I retire, which is not coming soon.
Good.
Okay, well, great participation and attendance. We love that, Joan and I. So thank you again, you guys. And I don't know that I think we're just Q&A next week because of the
Right.
short. So thanks again, Dan.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.